PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877 247 1581. 877 247 1581. 877 247 1581.
Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Hey travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call, because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820. Born to be wild.
Born to be wild. That's what it's all about. Microphone's a little bit loud tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, you're kind of staticky.
Yeah, just a little bit. Tiffany, I know you're listening. Could you, I don't know, be my eyes and ears for me? Live tonight in the studio, we have a gentleman by the name of Brady Baskin, who is not only a diver up at Lake Texoma, woo, he's also a spear fisherman. We were just talking about the nuances of spearfishing and how it is legal to take catfish in Oklahoma on a spear and a spear gun or other means that might be used by a scuba diver, free diver, snorkeler, etc. underwater. Down here in Texas, using a spear to go after any kind of game fish is a huge no-no.
Once again, why Oklahoma's better than Texas.
Hey, you know what?
No.
The door is right there. And you are welcome to go back to Oklahoma because this is Texas wild. This is not Oklahoma wild. I digress. Brady, thank you for being on the show tonight. Thank you for coming in to discuss why Oklahoma is not better than Texas. We're happy to have you here. And we want to go over some of your adventures. Now, I met you earlier this year. We didn't meet face-to-face. We kind of met virtually online.
Through Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. But I got a message from you saying, hey, my name is so-and-so, and I do a bunch of search and recovery. Well, I used to do a bunch of search and recovery diving up here in Oklahoma. I'd love to have somebody to hand it off to. And then here I am now today watching your search and recovery videos. So I haven't gotten any of that work. But you know what? I'm less interested in the work as I am in the friendship.
Wait till it's fireworks season and I'm up to my eyeballs in fireworks the whole month of May and June, and then you'll probably get a few dives thrown your way.
Well, I don't. In May, June, July, man, those are times I can't leave, go anywhere, do anything because we're so swamped at Eagle Mountain Lake and surrounding areas here. But you know what? it's a good thing that you're a Texoma diver because, there's days I don't want to make that 2-hour drive.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that anymore nowadays that still dive in Texoma from my experience.
And
there's not very many.
I can't imagine why, because it's much cleaner and clearer than anything we dive down here.
Yeah.
The salt water is not a factor in diving. You don't have to add more weight, etc., because it's not, it's sort of salty, brackish water, but it's not like the ocean. There's more current. There's just more to do underwater in Texoma than there is anywhere around here.
My big deal with Texoma is I tell people ask me all the time about where I'd like to dive. I've dove all over the world. I've dove in the Mediterranean. I've dove over in Bora Bora, Hawaii, all around Mexico and the Caribbean. Yeah. And honestly, I'm not just saying this. There's no place I would rather dive than Lake Texoma. I went to some.
And why is that?
Because of the fish life, and not just because I'm spearfishing, but because the fish life is so prevalent. A lot of that's because of the salt content in the water. But, I went and competed in a spearfishing tournament 20 years ago up in Lake Tenkiller in Oklahoma, where you can see 20 feet in some places. And there was hardly any fish. And, I get kind of bored if I'm just looking at mud and rocks. So that's the thing about Texoma.
I know. I like to see rocks every once in a while.
Well, there's just not much to do down here. There's fish. There's plenty of fish life down here, but up in Texoma, it's a little bit different because you can actually see them.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember the bull shark that was caught in Texoma years ago?
It wasn't caught. It was found deceased on one of the beaches. The rumor has it that there was a guy that went down to Galveston, somewhere on the Texas coast, caught it, brought it up in his boat, and just dumped it in the lake as a prank.
And it didn't live, did it?
Correct. It might have lived for a little bit. I don't think it was a bull shark. It might have been. I thought it was a sandbar shark, though.
That's what I was to understand, is that it was a square.
Yeah.
Square. It was a bull shark. Sorry.
No. But, people always ask me about all the, the catfish as big as a Volkswagen and all those stories. And I just laugh because I'm 45, and I've been diving in Lake Texoma since I was probably about 8 years old. And
anybody who knows a diver always tells the diver about this story about the catfish the size of school buses at the dam.
Yeah. And what I attribute,
we hear that story more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And what I attribute it to is the fact that when you're diving, especially in a lake like Texoma, where the visibility is maybe 2 to 5 feet, I'm going to be honest, there's some points where I don't get scared anymore. But when I was younger, you're going into an unknown environment. You can't see what's beyond your arm's length reach. And it does amp up the fear factor. And so when you do see a catfish and your stuff underwater appears 30% bigger than it is when you're visually looking at it topside, you see an 80-pound catfish, it's going to look like it's over 100 pounds. And then you add in the anxiety that a person has that is not already really comfortable diving in dirty or black water. Yeah. It makes them freak out and over exaggerate and panic.
Right. And now I've seen catfish that could put our heads in their mouth with no effort whatsoever. But a catfish the size of a bus. Yeah. Come on.
That'd be an old catfish.
Testing. That's much better right there. Maybe our mics are too loud, I think. Let's turn yours down just a little bit, Brady. Okay. There we go.
Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay,
that's a lot better. Now I'm not hurting my own ears as I talk. And that's what you want when you're on a radio show. You want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this striped mullet that you claim to have seen in Lake Texoma. Now, I've seen some striped mullet, and I've only ever seen them in Florida on the coast.
So I believe that's what it was. I was spearfishing free.
You don't think it could have been like a deformed striper?
It could have been, but my memory's pretty good for what I see underwater. And I was free diving, spearfishing out at the lake, just breath holding. And I was out at the dam, and all of a sudden I saw something that didn't look like it belonged there. And so I took a shot with my pole spear. I missed it, but I saw it just sitting there really slow in the water, swimming by for several seconds, long enough to realize that it didn't look like it didn't belong there. So it might have not, I didn't know if it was legal or not, but I took a shot at it. And I went
back. One of these things is not like the other.
Correct. And I went back and told my dad, and he was big into marine biology, and he was, one of the pioneers of scuba diving, spearfishing in Lake Texoma back in the 60s. Did everything self-taught, and he had a bunch of his old fish books from college, and he gave me one. He said, look through there, and whatever it is, it'll be in there. And he helped me look through there, and I pointed to the picture and I said, that right there is what I saw. And when you read the description on it, talks about how it thrives in brackish water. Well, Lake Texoma has a very
Being
high salt
yeah.
content. And I believe that's what it was. Actually, about the funny thing was, it was only about a year before that I was doing a dive job over on the Oklahoma side at, I believe it was Cross Point Church Camp. And I was swimming back up in the shallows to the beach, and I turned over a rock for whatever reason, and I saw a crab. And so when I saw that crab, I instantly swatted my hand down and I caught it.
Yeah.
And I caught it because I knew it didn't belong there. At least I didn't think it did. So I take off my gear, I go up to my truck, I get an old Burger King cup out of it, dump out the Coke, put a little bit of lake water in it. I dropped the crab in there, and I called my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad," I said, "I think I just found a crab in Lake Texoma." And he goes, "You mean like a crawfish, a crawdad?" And I said, "No, come on, Dad." I said, "You didn't raise no fool." I was like, I know my fish life pretty good, better than the average person.
I know a crab isn't a crawdad.
Yeah, I said round body, 2 front side pinchers, just like a saltwater crab. And he said, "You need to call the guys at the fish hatchery, at the fish hatchery, because that's where the fish biologists work out of." Okay. And there's a fish hatchery just a little bit north of Durant where they raise fish, and they stock different bodies of water in Lake Texoma. So I call those guys and I tell them what I have. And I said, "You want me to bring it to you?" Well, I think they just thought I was a crackhead, because they were like, "A crab?" And I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "It's a crab." And I described it, and they were like, you could hear it in their voice. They were rolling their eyes. And I'm actually friends with a couple of guys now that work out there. And one of them remembered the story. And they were like, "Sure, you can bring it by here if you want." So I said, "Okay, I'll be by in a couple hours and I get done with this dive job." So I get done. I drive back to town. I head a little bit north to Armstrong, and I go to the fish hatchery. And I get out of the car and I bring them up this Burger King cup with muddy lake water in it, and I pour it out into the guy's hand. And he just looks at it for a couple seconds and just has this dazed look. And he looks at me and he says, "You found this in Lake Texoma?" And I said, "You're darn right I did." And I told him exactly where I found it. And he said, "Wow." He said, "That does not belong there." So he got off.
What kind of crab did they say it was?
Well, at first they didn't know. So I was getting excited thinking it was going to become the Brady mud crab or the Baskin crab, because my dad explained to me how species locating works, and how when you discover something, you get to submit a name, and it has to be approved by a board or something like that.
Science journal.
Yeah. You have the right to be able to name that new species. So I was already in my head, man, I came up with so many cool different names. And so they took all my information down, and they said they'd contact me. Well, they ended up sending it off to, I think, OU, and then OU sent it off to university somewhere in South Texas, and they dissected it and analyzed it. And it took a couple months before I finally heard something back, and finally I did. And they said, well, it turns out it's a freshwater crab species called the Harris mud crab. And at the time I discovered that in Lake Texoma, the furthest north one had ever been discovered was just right across the Texas-Mexico border. And they had started out in Central America and gradually just been working their way north, but they had never discovered it at that point, I don't think, in any Texas lakes. So I was disappointed I didn't get to name it, but I thought it was pretty cool that I discovered a new species to the lake.
Right.
So they went out to that spot, they set some traps, and they called me to confirm. They were like, "Are we in the right spot?" And they gave me the location. I said, "That is the exact spot I found it." They said, "We set traps everywhere. We haven't been able to catch any more. Maybe it was just a fluke deal." Well, the very next year, the population had already boomed. And now you can go out anywhere on the lake in Lake Texoma, turn over a rock, and you'll find a little crab. It's got anywhere from a dime to about between a nickel and a quarter size body with round pinchers. It's kind of just brown and speckled color.
No kidding.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I bet you I know how they made it all the way up here from Mexico.
We were talking about this before air. How do you think?
Took the sidewalk.
Yeah, because they didn't cross the road.
No, they didn't cross the road. They took the sidewalk.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I love my crab joke. All right. So anyway, let's get back to it. What kind of? I remember when I was I was smoking a joint with my dog on the San Marcos River when I started spearfishing years ago. I wasn't even a diver yet, and it was just some people were coming down the river with flashlights and spears and asking to snorkel. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they said, "We're spearfishing." I said, "No, you're not." "Yeah, we're spearfishing. Can I try it?" I said, "Hell yeah, you can try it." So I jumped in the water and
I wouldn't have let some pothead hippie use my spear gun.
It wasn't a spear gun; it was just a pole spear. But in retrospect, I probably wouldn't either. But they were nice enough to let me give it a shot, and man, I got hooked.
Yeah, it's very addicting. So I started scuba diving when I was basically probably about 7 years old in our family pond. And my dad was a spear fisherman in Texoma.
There's no crabs in that pond, is there?
Yeah. and so I would use his spear guns. And me and my brother, I had an older brother, 2 years older than me. And so he was like a bookworm and would always read stuff. And he came and he had discovered an idea and he came and told me. So he said, hey, let's go in the garage. Let's find one of our old bicycle flags, the white fiberglass pole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tore the flag off, unbracketed it from one of the old bicycles. And then we went and we got a bicycle inner tube. And we took that inner tube and we stretched it down. And then I don't know if we duct taped it or what, but we fastened it to the end of the fiberglass pole. And then we sharpened the tip. And we went down in the pond and he taught me how to basically make a homemade pole spear. And we actually shot some little bluegills with it. So then my next step of spearfishing was I would always get the little cheap frog gigs like from Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
that are like $5. And I would take that and I would find like a little sapling. I would cut it down and shave the end and I would stick the frog gig on the end of that. And I would get out in our pond. We had a floating raft out in the middle because all the neighborhood swam at our family pond.
Yeah.
And I would hold my breath. Just a lot of times I would do it without a mask even. And I would swim up under the barge and there would be bluegills. Most people call them perch. They're not perch. And there would be a sunfish, a bluegill, laying right up underneath the styrofoam. And I would go up underneath it real slowly with that frog gig and I would stab it. Or since I had something to hit to, it would hit into the styrofoam. Then I would pull the spear out and I would have gotten a fish. And so then I got to where I could get them in open water sometimes. And then as I got older, I gradually did more and more spear fishing with my dad in the lake. And then probably around the time I was about 18 or 19, my dad bought me a pole spear. And I'd never even seen an actual pole spear from like a dive shop.
You'd always made them.
Yeah. And once and then I would use his old spear guns from like the 60s, which I still have. And once I used a pole spear, I was 100% addicted because I equate it to, a guy going to take a deer with a hunting rifle with a scope. You take a extreme more primitive you can get than that is hunting deer with a recurve. Well, the same thing with spearfishing.
Or longbow.
Yeah, exactly. So the most primitive form of spearfishing you can get, I believe, is a pole spear. And so other than like noodling. So I go and I just get addicted to it because
Can't quit yawning.
It's hard. You want me to slap you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a big dude.
So I went and got the pole spear and I would go and just go out to the lake all the time on my own and hold my breath and just, swim down on the rocks, lay there, for a minute or two and just wait for a big fish to swim by.
And this is all with a breath hold.
Yeah, all with the breath hold. Back when I was young and I would say I was a stud back then. I'm not now. I'm like you. I'm old and fat.
Yeah, I'm getting there. That's for sure.
I could hold my breath for over 4 minutes. I can't hold. I don't think I can hold my breath for 4 minutes now. But
I don't think I want to try.
That I can still hold it for a long time. And so the kicker to that is just relaxing your body and just kind of almost meditating underwater. And so I would shoot fish, and then I got to where I was shooting such big fish that when I would go to pin them down into the rocks or the dirt, a couple times it sheared off the end of my stainless steel double barred tip. Mm-hmm. So I went to a local machinist, had him fabricate me something. And once he did that, I stopped losing as many fish. But I love a pole spear.
Is it that spear you brought me, the one you had made?
I was going to ask that.
I don't know how anybody killed anything with that.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
I remember it was, 3-4 weeks ago. Yep. You did a dive somewhere out at Texoma, and you just happened upon this, we'll say homemade spear. It's not exactly a well-made spear, but it's a homemade spear, and that's what we're talking about here.
Yep.
And it just looked like, I don't know, it looked like somebody's last effort at a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I say that because it stayed at the bottom of the lake.
Exactly.
So let's. Where do you find it? What do you think happened with it? Where do you think it came from?
So I actually took my 75-year-old dad out. I didn't think he was going to go, but he actually went. First time he's went diving with me in a while. We were just free diving, just masking fins. I went with him and my son and my daughter's boyfriend, and we all had our pole spears and a spear gun. and we're at Eisenhower Marina, and it's a great spot to spearfish. If
was
anybody's
deep.
ever over on Texoma, all you do is you go around the marina office there to the west, and that whole rock bank. Once you get out deeper, it's a little sandy, but even in the shallow, it's really good. It's got a lot of trash fish, which you can legally shoot in Texas. And
Well,
so,
and that's a rocky and sandy bottom too, so that gives way to clear water.
correct. There you go. And so we're spearfishing along in the shallows, and all of a sudden we just come across it. And it's just a heavy galvanized pole. It probably felt like it weighed 10 pounds. And the funny thing that I thought was neat was whoever made it took the time to take a cutter and cut out a piece of diamond plate like an arrow shape.
But they couldn't do it evenly.
No, it wasn't
No.
very,
They
wasn't
couldn't
very
make it-
symmetrical.
Yeah, they couldn't make
Yeah.
it symmetrical.
And so they welded it to the end of it, and then it had a rope with a little loop that, like you said, they probably had on the wrist. So I wonder if maybe it was some guys that were bow fishing, and whenever they were shooting like a really big gar or illegally shooting a catfish, which sometimes some people do bow fishing.
Yeah.
If whenever they were trying to basically get it, they used that as a gig and they just stabbed it once it came up close to the boat. I don't know. It was bizarre.
That-
But I was happy to go get it on the way to the show today. I stopped at Eisenhower and I jumped out of my car and I shimmied down those rocks and evaded a couple rattlesnake bites just for you. And I dove in the water because I remembered pretty much the area where it was. Unfortunately, I found it. I might not be as good as you, but I'm pretty good at finding stuff, and I found it pretty quick. So
There's this buddy of mine. He's a crew member of ours, Matt. He's a real good friend. And he just recently bought his first boat. And I don't know if you know about what carp do to boats at night, but it's an awful noisy endeavor. They eat the algae off the bottom of the boat. Brady, I swear to God, it sounds like somebody's walking by and tapping your boat with a hammer.
really, I did
at
not know
night.
that.
Yeah. So Matt has become obsessed with trying to deal with these fish, and it's constant all night long. If you don't have your hull cleaned by Blue Diver Search and Recovery, then you're going to deal with this, and it's going to be constant, and it's going to be annoying, and it's going to drive you crazy, and it's absolutely doing that to Matt. So that spear that you brought back to me today, I'm going to take it down to him this weekend, and I'm going to say, "Hey, buddy, got you
A solution.
a little fishing tool here. Take you some oatmeal, sprinkle it in the water next to your boat, and wait for those suckers to come up. And then you can make yourself some carp balls."
There you go.
So what kind of fish do you go for typically when you go spearing?
I'm really wanting to get a catfish because I'd rather eat a catfish than,
Gar.
a buffalo or a gar. But I am still after a really monster gar. And the reason for that is, even though I've always loved using a pole spear, when I was in college, I had a job at a gym. This is back when I was a gym rat. Me and my brother were into strongman. And I would sometimes on my way to work, driving to Texas from Oklahoma, I would just go leave a couple hours early and I would stop on the dam and I would hike down the rocks with a mask fins and my pole spear and I would spearfish. Well, I'd saved up my money and I bought myself a brand new spear gun. And it was a double banded gun, probably had about 12 feet of line on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm at the Denison Dam on Lake Texoma. There's what I call jetties. About every quarter mile, there's a little rock outcropping that comes out a little bit. And I was on the end of one of those and I went down off the end where it was about 20 feet deep. Didn't have a successful hunt. I came up and I was in the shallow, probably about chest height. And I'd taken my head out of the water and I was messing with my mask. And I had the spear gun in my hand underwater and I put my head back underwater with the snorkel in my mouth. And as soon as I do, there's a big old huge gar and he's just staring right at me. And even though I knew it wasn't going to attack me or anything,
Still,
it
yeah.
makes your rear pucker. I mean, it made you go, whoa. I mean, you got all those jagged teeth and it was literally 6 inches from my mask. Its
Right.
face was.
How big do you think it was?
Well, it was right at about 6 feet and they get way bigger than that.
I mean,
So
just-
this wasn't a
just
monster.
Looking down the snout can be
Yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah. And so it's just right there. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I just freeze. And so it slowly just starts to swim away because gar are really curious. If you're free diving, they'll swim right up to you because they're curious.
Right.
And so he starts to swim away. Well, right as it does, I was like, oh, you're going to die now, sucker. So I take my spear gun and I put it right up to the body of it, which at that point was about 2.5 feet from me. And I squeezed that trigger. and I shoot that sucker and it punches right through it. And I jump out of the way. There was another big rock, a boulder right next to me. So I go to the side of that because my dad always taught me sometimes when you shoot a fish, if they're really thrashing around, you got to watch out for that spear tip. It can come around and, cut
Get
you.
Yeah.
And so I kind of jerk myself out of the way and that fish takes off and runs. And right as it does, and I was prepared for it. I've got a pretty strong grip. It catches and it takes my hand from right here out like that. And I hold it for about a half second, as tight as I can.
Yeah.
And then it pops out of my hand.
No kidding.
And no lie, I'm not exaggerating. It was just like when you see a sailfish being caught, the gar jumps out of the water and probably jumps 3-4 feet out of the water. And it's shaking like this and it hits the water. And as it hits the water and then goes down, I see my spear gun just go scoot, scoot, scoot across the top of the water. And then you hear a few bubbles, bloop, bloop, and it just goes and disappears.
Like 3 barrels on Jaws.
They're just like it. And so I just sat there in disbelief and I was like, that dang guard just stole my brand new spear gun. I was like, I'm getting it back. So I go and I wait a second to see if it starts to die. So I give it a couple minutes and then I start swimming all around the area, holding my breath, going out really far, like 40 feet out from the dam going down. And I can't find my gun anywhere. So I chalked it up to a loss. Well, the next year, I go out with my dad.
That would have made me so angry.
It did, but the story gets better.
Okay.
So the next year, it was actually a year and a half later, we're out at the lake with my dad and we're on a couple wave runners and we took our tanks with us and we go down to go diving and we're about a quarter mile north of that same jetty. And we're just swimming along and all of a sudden my dad actually grabs a spear. And I found some spear tips in my day out there because back in the day, more people spearfish than now. And I've come across some spearfishing stuff, but it was a full length shaft. And he picks it up and hands it to me underwater. I'm like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Well, all of a sudden I follow it down and there's a cord attached. So at this point, I'm just thinking, this is weird. So I start just following the cord through the muck. It was buried on the muck. And I keep going. All of a sudden I get to a gun and it's covered in algae and I wipe it all off and wait for everything to settle. And I look and it says JBL spear gun, model 38, I think is what it was. It was my spear gun, the exact same one. I've got it back and I still have it to this day.
You still use it?
No, I don't use it. I got a brand new one from a place that I've found down in Destin called Ben Thick. I'm actually going to do some free diving training with them probably next month. And spear guns now are made a whole lot better and more efficient.
I imagine so, but
yeah.
You couldn't take it apart and fix it and get it working?
Oh, no. I've used it multiple times since
okay.
it.
So
I just don't
work.
Oh, yeah. I just don't use it regularly.
Do you want to sell it?
No, heck no. No.
It's a wall hanger now.
He just got it back. You think he wants to sell it?
I got this badass cast iron pole spear I'll give you for it. It doesn't have a symmetrical arrow on it, but it'll work. Well, that's remarkable. That's quite a story about getting your gun back.
And then
how do you figure that gar got off the spear?
I don't think it got off. I think it died, and then it just rotted off, and the spear gun was left there because the spear gun and the line were stretched out. They weren't all together, so that would make sense.
Okay.
That as it died, it probably floated for a while,
yeah.
And then it sank, and it was just trailing along that gun with it. And it was only in like 10 feet of water, and then that same area of the dam was where the only time.
How far had it gone from where you shot it?
Right at almost exactly a quarter mile, because it was at the next rock outcropping.
So not very far.
Yeah, not very far, really.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad you got your gun back. I have a similar story. It didn't involve a fish, about an underwater hole cleaning brush that we used for scrubbing the bottoms of boats that disappeared on me and showed up 4 months later, 17 slips away.
Oh, wow.
But I got it back. That's the important thing.
Wish we had it now.
Yeah, I wish we did too. We just got a message from a customer who said he found somebody else in the interim. Until we get another method. We don't have it back yet. We're probably not going to have it back for the rest of the year, but that's another story for another time. But for right now, we're going to try to wind it down. We got some commercials coming up.
Okay.
We got to pay a few bills. That's how we keep the lights on around here. But we appreciate you coming in and talking with us. We're going to be just back in just a little bit and talk a little bit more.
That sounds good.
At
Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No, no one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Joco Community Radio. Listen live at jococommunityradio.com.
Born to be wild.
NTX Radio, formerly Joco Community Radio, is a member of EMG, a radio and podcast collective. Proudly serving all of North Texas. We are live 365 on the TuneIn Radio Network and on our station app. Download it for free. Check out our lineup and more at ntxradio.com. We thank our valued partners in helping us amplify the voices of North Texas. Be sure to connect with Todd Hurd and Associates Attorneys at Law for your civil law needs at texasattorneylaw.com and use code JOCO2024 for 25% off your first order at thetiffy.com. Processing credit cards? Join the Swipe Nation today and save on processing fees at swipenationusa.com. Locally owned and operated. Are you ready to deliver the right message to the right people at the right time? Reach out to us at ntxradio.com, at t.herd@ntxradio.com for advertising rates as low as $50 a month. Sorry about the laughing there.
I was going to say, were you laughing at me?
No.
No.
I promise there's a good reason. So anyway, just before the commercial break, we were talking about a fish that you had speared.
Yeah, so I was actually using a tank this time, which I prefer to spearfish without a tank. But at the area we were at, there's a bunch of trees with flatheads on them, and you can't really find the location if you're out free
That's
diving.
a fish now, not a screwdriver.
Correct. There you go. And which is legal. We had this debate before air. You were trying to tell me it wasn't legal in Oklahoma, and I had to pull out the regulations and show you, which is legal in Oklahoma to spearfish. So
legal to spearfish catfish.
Yes.
Of course it's legal to spearfish.
Yeah.
But taking a game fish with a spear down here will get you hung up by your toes if you get caught doing it by Texas Parks and Wildlife. Apparently things are different in Oklahoma.
That's right. We're just
a lot of things are different in Oklahoma.
So we're out spearfishing on this group of trees, and it's really bad visibility. And I see a pretty good sized flathead, about 25 to 30 pounds. And I go to shoot it with my pole spear. And when I typically shoot a big fish with a pole spear, if you just let the fish go, it's going to rip off of there unless you get it like shot through the bone part of the head. And so I shot it in the midsection. Yeah. And sorry, thank you. And so I would typically take the spear and I would pin the fish down, and then I would run my hand down the spear shaft through the gills and out through the mouth to get like a lock on it. And then I would hightail it to the surface if I'm free diving or, scuba diving, doesn't matter. So I go to pin the fish down. When I do, the fish was big enough, and as hard as I went to pin it down, it was thrashing. It broke off the end of the spear tip to where the spear tip threads on with like a 6 millimeter, 7 millimeter thread onto the spear shaft, and so, which is fiberglass. And so it broke off right there. And so at that point, I followed around my dad for a few more minutes.
And now the fish has now swum off with your spear tip in it.
With my spear tip in it, which I didn't think anything about it. I was just mad that it broke and I lost the fish and I wasn't going to get to eat it. And so I go topside and my dad goes to get in the boat because he's pretty much out of air. And I had, I don't know, maybe 100 pounds left. And this is kind of one of the downsides to when you dive as much as I dive, you get a little bit too comfortable and you get too complacent. And you have, even though you have confidence, because you have so much confidence in your skill set, you end up doing stuff that's dangerous and stupid, or at least I do, or I have. So instead of getting in the boat, I'm fixing to, and my dad says,
"What was your remaining air pressure when you got out of the water? When you started to get out of the water?"
I don't remember. It was probably around 100 pounds, 150 pounds. I know it. You're supposed to get out at 500. I know.
We dive down to 200 and call it quits.
Yeah, we call it quits.
Yeah. So my dad says, "Hey, you have another pole spear up here that's got a tip on it." I said, "Give it to me." I said, I want to try and get a fish, since we've dove for a little while. I want to come back with a fish. So he hands me the pole spear. I go underwater and I feel myself having to start to pull air. We say suck air. And you'll do that when you get down to maybe like less than 50 pounds, where you've only got about
a hard draw.
Yeah. You've only got about 3 breaths. And when you know it, and that's what I always tell people that are inexperienced divers, you need to get in a swimming pool and you need to suck a tank completely dry, which is a different effect than even turning it off. Even better, I think, to know that feeling in case your equipment malfunctions. I had a pressure gauge that actually broke on me when I was doing a dive job last week. And so I had to basically, play it safe and quit early. So I decide I'm going to start swimming up towards the shore to where I'm in shallower water in case I do run out of air. And as I'm swimming pretty fast along the sandy bottom, I come across another old sunken cedar tree, and there's a flathead just laying underneath it. So I was like, "Oh, you're dead, sucker. I'm going to get you." And I come up with my pole spear. And right as I'm going to shoot, I feel myself have to start basically take my last breath. So I shoot that sucker, and I was like, "Okay, I'll get a hold of it, and I'll just exhale my bubbles, and I'll swim slowly up to the surface." I'm only in like 18 feet of water. No
catfish had other thoughts.
Exactly. And so I shoot it, and as I start pulling it up, there was a rope that had gotten tied around like my first stage of my regulator at my tank. And I couldn't see it. Well, at the same time, the band of the pole spear got caught on one of the tree limbs. And I have the fish, my hands in the mouth like this, and the fish is right in front of my stomach. And I'm kicking as hard as I can, trying to break loose. And at that point, I'm completely out of air. And at that point, I go into panic mode. I'm like, I'm about to die. So I'm like, my instinct was let go of the fish and just, swim up to the top. And if I still can't, if I'm hung up from there, which I didn't realize it though, I could always dump my BC and just unstrap it and hightail it to the surface. So about that time, I was like, I'm not letting go of this fish. I got a couple more hard kicks in me. So I kick really, really hard and I jerk with the fish, and it pops that pole spear band off the cedar limb. And around the same time, I guess that rope came loose too. I didn't discover it till I got topside, and I made it to the top. And it was one of the first times ever that I was like, wow, my stupidity and my
hard-headedness.
Yeah, basically just about got me killed. And that was pretty scary. One of the only other scary times I've had spearfishing was, and I didn't tell you the best part. I get the fish, I throw it on board. My dad grabs it from me, and I get my gear taken off. I get on my pontoon boat, and I look, and my pole spear was still through the fish. And I look a couple inches over, and there's another hole, and it didn't register at first. I look at it, and I'm like, no way, that's the fish I just shot. And I stick my fingers in the hole, and that's the momentum. I still have it in my dive box. I've got the spear tip from the broken off pole spear. It was lodged like basically right up against its bone up near its lungs.
Not in the head bone though.
Not in the head bone. No, correct. And so
no, in the backbone.
Yeah. So one other time, the only other true scary time I was feared for my life. Me and my wife took a 10-year anniversary trip to Bora Bora, and we had one of those little over the water bungalows you see in the commercials, and it was amazing. And there were tropical fish everywhere, and I got to see a pretty good sized black tip reef shark. And I never could get very close to it because it was, it was scared of you, even though I was just out snorkeling, free diving. So I got the idea. I found this little old curtain rod thing in the right off that somebody had thrown off the bungalow on the bottom. It was only about 8 feet deep there. And so I took that, and at the restaurant, they had these big shrimp skewers. They're the wooden skewers that are about 8 inches long.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
I can't. So I took three. I took three of those. I took 3 of those.
MacGyver
and
divers.
then I found a big giant rubber band that was used on some of the towels or something in the bungalow, and I made a little pole spear that was about 2 feet long, and it was like a paralyzer tip on there. So I smuggled some bread from the restaurant the night before. I took home some rolls in my pocket, and I took those rolls and I broke them up underwater, and I attracted some tropical fish. I shoot them with my homemade pole spear, and I take my dive knife and I cut them up. And
underwater.
Underwater. I'm doing all this right off the bungalow. My wife's laying out, listening to her music topside, just rolling her eyes like, when's my husband ever going to spend some time with me? And because I couldn't get enough of the snorkeling. And I start cutting them up underwater and sticking them in a mesh bag. And I was going to try and chum in that shark.
Right.
And as I'm cutting them up, I look up, and literally 10 feet from me in a dead swim straight towards me is about a 7-foot long black tip reef shark. And I just froze, and I was like, I've swam with sharks my whole life since I was a little kid. I don't really get that concerned around them at all, but I had cut up fish all around me, and I knew it was coming for those, and I was right in the way. And so I just froze, and I didn't even let out a bubble. And as soon as I barely moved, it spooked the shark, and it swam off.
You're free diving, not scuba diving.
No, just free diving.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and tied the fish up to the bungalow, and the next morning I went out to check, and they were gone. The shark had come and gotten them that night, and I found the dive bag the next day a little ways away. Well, that just made me want even more. So when we had rented a car and we were driving around the island, I saw a guy coming out of the water that had been a local guy, a native that had been spearfishing. And he didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak his language, but I found a mutual person that could communicate a little bit. And basically he agreed to take me diving for a case of beer. So I said, okay, well, I'll just give you whatever a case of beer cost, So he went and picked me up at the bungalow the next day, and we're driving. He tells me where we're going to go, the guy who was interpreting, and it made it sound like it wasn't very far away. So as we're driving out in he's got a little outboard motor on the boat, and we're driving out. We go out past the reef, and we turn, and I start pointing. I was like, are we, there? And I start pointing to my watch. And he just looks at me and kind of grins, and he's like, and just shakes his head. We drive for almost an hour, and as we're driving around the island, we go to this part of the island. It's a really poor area, and there's homeless people, like an encampment there. And we're going past that, and I thought, and then every time I would try and communicate with the guy, like, where are we going? He just would act like, nah, don't worry about it. Even though I didn't, we could communicate good enough to at least do that. And so at that point, I started getting paranoid. I thought, this guy's going to try and take me somewhere. They think I'm some rich American tourist. They're going to try and kidnap me for ransom or something. So I went ahead and put on my fins, because even though I'm a fat boy, I can outswim about anybody, and I can hold my breath for a long time. So I put on my fins. I grab my mask, and I throw it around my arm like you do in an emergency situation. And he just keeps driving. So I start thinking through my head, okay, what am I going to do if he starts headed towards shore? So I notice there's an ice chest in front of me. There's nothing. And so I start scanning the boat. Is there duct tape? Are there zip ties? I don't see anything, but there's a little ice chest in front of me. So I was like, I wonder what's in that. So I just go and I pop the lid, and I told myself, if I see duct tape or anything suspicious in there, I'm just jumping over the boat, and I'll hold my breath and swim underwater for a while, and I'll make it short and find my way back to town. I open it up, and it's got coconut juice, lime, and all this other stuff. So at that point, I realized I was okay. So we finally stop right after that. We go spearfishing. We shoot a bunch of fish. He gets in the boat before me, and all of a sudden there's a couple reef sharks swimming around me, eating fish heads and stuff. I'm like, what's going on? So I swim up to the boat, because he had already told me, hey, we need to go. And I get in the boat, and he was cleaning all the fish right there, and he dumps them in all the juices he had concocted. He was making ceviche. So he gives it to me, and the whole way back, I ate like all the fish I shot. It was delicious, but it was quite the experience, though.
Scared the hell out of you.
Yeah, it did at first.
Made you wonder if you'd made a mistake.
Exactly.
That's funny. So tell me a little bit about the search and recovery work that you do. You're a search and recovery diver like we are. You get calls for lost wallets, lost phones, lost jewelry, watches, rings, necklaces. Tell me a little bit about that and what you enjoy so much about doing it.
I just enjoy it because
it's rewarding, isn't it?
It's rewarding, and you're doing something that very few other people have the skill set to do,
or the gumption to do.
Correct. Those two
Takes
things
a lot of guts.
combined. And as a Christian, I believe that we're all of us men are made for adventure. It's wired into us. You look at Abraham in the Bible, God sent him on an adventure. And the more adrenaline I get rush from doing a dive, it just makes me want it even more. And that's why, you were razzing me about how I told you I didn't do that much diving.
I don't do that much diving
I haven't in the
anymore.
last couple of years, but my social media, it started blowing up and I was getting just tons of requests for dive jobs from that. And so I don't do any underwater welding, but I do any type of light duty work. I've never got to clean any boat holes like you. I've changed out props.
You're not missing out on much.
But I've done tons of work for sand companies along the Red River. Even did a dive job one time in the winter where my mask and fins froze to the work barge, the diamond plate decking, and I had to splash water on there to get them unstuck to put them on. And people always say, "Oh, well, you're wearing a wetsuit." Yeah. You tell me that wearing a wetsuit makes you comfortable when it's 35 degrees outside.
A wetsuit, not a warm suit.
Exactly. And they're like, "Well, don't you pee in it?" I'm like, "Well, of course, but that only helps for a few seconds,
Then
And
you smell like pee the rest of the day too.
And so I've done dive jobs in the Red River. I did a real sketchy one time where they were generating, and so the river current was running, and the work barge cable had snapped, and the dredge head was stuck down there, and they had to have the all the stuff, the boom and shiv, all that re-spooled. So I had to basically carabine myself into the catwalk and pull myself against the current in the dark. I was out there till like 4 a.m. and
that's a shitty job.
I mean, I made a ton of money, but looking back on it, I mean, I should have charged probably triple that because it was super, super dangerous. But the adrenaline high I got from that, I mean, I couldn't even sleep that night,
right?
And I didn't tell those people, but I probably would have done it for free just because I had had so much fun doing it.
I was telling Junior yesterday about a job that we got called on. It was I want to say it was the beginning of June. It was still storming a lot, still raining a lot. And
the Trinity River one?
Yeah, the Trinity River golf cart job. Every year they put on this big event down at Panther Island Pavilion in Fort Worth, and every year somebody gets drunk, drives a golf cart into the Trinity River. They call me every year, and that day he called, I had just called off all the work for the day. It's storming, it's lightning, it's just nasty weather outside. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to be outside. And I damn sure don't want to be in the water. And so I had just talked to Diana, one of my other divers at the time. She used to host this show with me, but she just left for Corpus recently. And I said, as much as I'd love to come down there and get that golf cart out of the water for you today, I just don't think I could do it. The weather's just not going to cooperate. I'll give you $1,000 to come down here and dive on this golf cart and get it pulled out of the river for me. That sounds like a great deal. I just can't do it. It's too risky. There's too much lightning. I'll give you $1,500 to come and get this golf cart out of the river. I can appreciate the urgency that you're working with here. I would really like to. I'll give you $2,000. Well, it looks like it's going to let up here in about 15 minutes. We'll be on our way. We went and dove on that golf cart and got it pulled out of the river. But I posted that video to my Instagram like I do with a lot of my videos. And the rental company for the golf carts saw it before they got the call from the event planner that a golf cart had gone in the river. Yeah, so the event planner tried to pass it off. I don't know what happened, yada, yada. Golf cart company was having no part of that because they already saw the recovery on the
They seen the leader of the event center on the video.
Yeah.
How can you deny it then?
Yeah. So that was one of our more fun jobs. It's always fun diving in the Trinity River because you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what you're going to encounter while you're down there. There was another one that we had at the beginning of the summer. It was a lost phone in downtown Fort Worth. And I actually let one of my other divers, Matt, told you about him earlier.
Yeah.
He dove that one in his wetsuit. Again, not a warm suit, just a wetsuit. And he never found it. But while he was down there, he happened to look up because we were underneath a bridge, and he saw people living in the rafters of below the bridge.
Wow.
On his next dive down, he came down and found a hypodermic needle.
Ugh.
And he goes, "Well, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I didn't
Nah.
find the phone. I'm sorry. I'm not doing this again."
I would have done the same thing. Though.
I would have too.
I would have quit.
Our divers have the right to call any dive for any reason without judgment.
Yeah.
So, would you be interested in coming down here and doing some work with us? Maybe trying out some full face, some underwater comms.
Yeah, as long as I've got a firework, I've got several businesses, but one of them we shoot.
You know, they say every millionaire has at least 6 forms of income.
I'm at 5, so close, just about
Getting there, aren't we?
And so I've got a firework business. We shoot a bunch of firework shows all over southern Oklahoma. So the month of May and June, I don't have a lot of free time, some free time.
Mm-hmm.
So call me. But yeah, I've got a full face mask with communication. I just don't have
Ocean Reef or OTS?
Ocean Reef.
Do you like it?
Well, I haven't used it in like 20 years, so I'll go dig it out of the barn this weekend. And,
you know, they've made
test it out.
Really great upgrades on the Ocean Reef Neptune G Diver mask. Now they have a brow light. Have you seen those?
I've seen the brow light. When the guy that has Red River Scuba, he sells equipment.
Red River Scuba.
He's in Colbert. He's the guy that I've done dive jobs with, where we did that radioactive thing for the sand company.
I'll have to look him up.
He's a good guy, and he's hardcore. He can do blackout diving, and that's one thing that I get a lot of calls for. I know you do it, but
I love it.
I've gotten tons of work from people who have said, "Hey, we had a dive outfit out of Texas," usually. Sorry, no offense. It wasn't you, but they'll be like, "Yeah, we had this dive company come out of Texas, and they couldn't see anything, and they couldn't see their hand in front of their mask, and they kind of got weirded out and didn't want to do it." And I'm like, those are the type of dives that I specialize in.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it wasn't you.
I think
it wasn't you.
We get calls like that too. That there's
other people can handle it.
Yeah, out of Texas.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people that aren't like us that don't want to dive in the dark water,
or they'll swim underneath a boathouse
and get scared.
Yeah, and basically that's what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
but that's the thing is I've done it so much since I was a kid that I thrive in that environment.
Yeah,
I
the adrenaline, the unknown.
Yeah,
that's what I like, is because you don't know.
And
what's
people always
happen.
ask me, they say, "Well, do you wear gloves?" And I'm like,
No.
Why would I wear
all
gloves?
Dexterity.
And I'm like, I can't feel it. And I tell them when I do my search grid, I've got muck that I can run almost all the way up to my shoulder sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have to take my bare hand and just run it through that mud with my fingertips. Yeah. And I feel for whether it's the diamond wedding ring, I found a couple of those in Lake Texoma, or the Keys. And I was like, that's how you do it, is by feel. You can't see it in most places.
The phone I found not very
Braille
long ago.
diving.
That's what we call it. A couple of days ago that we went for that phone dive over at Eagle Mountain Marina. The Eagle Mountain Marina.
Phone dive at Eagle Mountain Marina.
Yeah, because that's one that the whole dock come down, and I had to go digging for that phone.
Oh yeah, the phone had landed.
It was like I'm sitting here on
corrugated tin.
I'm sitting here on the corrugated tin going like this, and I had to find the muck, and I barely found the end of the phone to pull it back up.
And one thing I've discovered over the years of doing it, learning the hard way, because I have had some mistakes where I had some unsuccessful recoveries in the past, is like when you're going under a boathouse, everybody's got those cedar trees. They drop under there for fish attraction. And when you're filling, you come across a tree, you don't just grab it and yank it and move it out of your way. You have to meticulously run your hands through it, and
search the whole thing,
and then cut off all the fishing line that gets tangled around you, and the fish hooks that get dug in your arm, and search that before you can move it out of the way, because a lot of times that's where the object you're looking for gets trapped.
It's right there, in that nest.
Yeah.
On that note, we had a dive at Bridgeport. It was this year. Diana took the job, and it was still wintertime. It was still, the water was still 55, maybe 58 degrees. And so she goes down there, and I had sent her by herself to do it because I was working on something else. And she calls me back after maybe 2 hours of diving and goes, "I can't find it. I don't know what to tell you. It ain't down there. There's a big freaking tree in the middle of where I'm trying to search." I said, "Just do what you can. If you can't find it, you can't find it, but do what you can." So the following weekend, I had felt bad because we had taken a significant amount of money for this job and she couldn't perform.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back out there with her, and the customer met me there. And I remember Diana had said something about fishing line. There was a lot of fishing line down there. So, of course, I brought my knife with me. I said, "Diana, why don't you give it another shot? We're going to try again. We're going to try some different techniques today." So she dove on it 3 times. 3 different times she got tangled up on fishing line. One got wrapped around her fin, one got wrapped around her first stage on a regulator, and then the other one got wrapped around her head. And so she's down there like with a samurai blade doing all this cutting and getting all this line off of her. She can't find the phone no matter what. So we sent the customer to the gas station to buy some rope. And he came back with this 100-foot long yellow nylon rope. I said, Diana, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the end of this rope and I want you to thread it through every branch you find. I want you to thread it through and then bring it back to me. So she brought it back to me. She threaded through all the branches and wrapped it all up, brought it back to me, and I put a slip knot on it and I pulled it until the slip knot met the tree. And then we wrapped it around a pole on the dock and we just pulleyed it, the whole gamut of tree branch, and just brought all of it up. And so she went down there on the first dive and found the phone.
Oh, wow.
So there are ways around it.
Yeah.
There are ways of solving problems when you think there are none.
Yeah. So have you ever talked about knives much on this show?
We love knives.
Okay.
We absolutely love knives.
So
although the topic does put us a little on edge.
That one took me a second. That's the Oklahoma in me. I'm a little slow. That was a good one.
Thank you.
That was
I'm glad you got the point.
But I'm cheating.
I got a handle on these knife jokes now. Okay.
So I dive with an old Navy Mark III dive knife. It's big, it's beefy, but it's just personally what I like.
And if you drop it, it goes straight down.
Yeah, and it's,
you know where to find it.
It's got a long enough blade too that when I'm working, if I want to stab it down into the mud, I can. But I'll never forget when I finally got certified after I'd been diving for like 15 years because we were about to go on vacation. I had to get my C card. And YMCA, by the way, baby.
Long time ago.
I had some guys in Mexico laugh at me when they saw my card. I'm going to get off topic. This is a good one. Oh, I don't have it. I lost it. I got a print off piece of paper. So we're in Mexico on the Pacific side, Hualtuco. And me and my wife at the time, she was my girlfriend. She had gotten certified and I had trained her. So she was a stud diver. And they look at our C cards that were YMCA and they just laugh. They literally laugh. But they looked at my dad. They could tell he was old school. This was back in my, strongman days. So I looked pretty physically fit. They went ahead and
based on your stature, you're not the type of dude I'd laugh at. Really.
Oh, well, thanks. And so they looked at my wife and she's about 5 foot tall, 100 pounds. And they were like, you got to do a checkout dive. So they did the old thing and I was impressed with it. They got her in the pool. They threw her gear in the all of her gear in the deep end. They turned everything off and they didn't even let her have a mask. And I gave her a pep talk and I was like, Sarah, don't let me down. I know you can do this. And she held her breath, swam about 20 feet underwater, went right up to the tank, turned it on and passed it. But yeah.
Perfect. Wow.
So we'll talk knives next time because I got some knife stories for you.
Oh, we love knife stories. I've got the knife I carry with me everywhere I go is my dad's old buck knife. It's a knife I literally watched him cook dinner with my entire childhood. When he passed away, my mom gave it to me.
Oh, awesome.
And
awesome.
It's absolutely an heirloom and absolutely one of my most highly prized possessions. But I do have a knife collection, and I'd be happy to go over with you sometime. Maybe I'll even bring it in here to the studio the next time you're on the show.
Well, I'll bring two. I got two that are made for keepsakes.
Right on. What kind are they?
So my dad's old his old dive knife from the 60s, the old Scuba Pro that's about 1.5 feet long.
Yeah.
I put it on a plaque and made a thing for him to hang in his restaurant. And there's another one that's a SOG dive knife that I used for 15 years straight.
More about these when we come back next time we're on the show. Thanks for being on the show, Brady. Thanks for coming on the studio. Looking forward to next time. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next week.
So, yeah.
Joco Community Radio.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supply,